So as we talk about experimental design, I want to remind us that not all science is experimental. Plenty of it is descriptive, simply describing nature. Even experimental science isn't just a bunch of experiments. Do you think scientists just wake up one day and say, I know what experiment I'm going to do today? Not all science is science fair project, and that may be your experience with it to date, but usually science fair projects are not all that great. They're kind of mediocre because these are usually young people that don't have a lot of experience that goes into the project. And so when they just kind of pull something off the shelf and try to do it themselves, they just don't have that experience or background knowledge to make it a really powerful experiment.
Some science fair projects turn out great. My son won his third grade science fair project because he did it on something he knew, paper airplanes. So I'm sure at some point you've gone over the scientific method. Now, it's not necessarily a recipe to be followed, but it does emphasize one really important thing. It's a process. It's not just a one-step idea. And even though we're going to emphasize the experimentation side of things, there's a lot that comes before that, and also some backtracking as well. If your conclusion is you are wrong, you might need to back up to your hypothesis. There's also some different views on this, rather than it being a linear process, that it is kind of, maybe not circular, but it's complicated. That you test ideas in an experiment here in the middle, but that is preceded by some exploration and discovery, those background observations, that after you test those ideas, you evaluate them and see, are they beneficial? You ask for feedback from other people. And then all of these pieces interact.
So before an experiment, I may have made a lot of observation, maybe years worth of observations. Like, my neighbor's lawn is greener than mine, or, this dogwood tree seems to bloom about the same time every single year. So that's a lot of information, but it's just data. It's descriptive. It's not explaining anything. If I want to know how or why something happens, I need an experiment. So I need to design the experiment. I need to do the experiment. I need to collect data, and I need to analyze it, and maybe go on from there. It doesn't always have to be extensive, but it can be. But there's a lot of work that goes in before the experiment even takes place. So remember that science needs to meet those basic qualifications of good science, that it needs to be having to do with the natural world, the natural laws, that it needs to be empirical, at least our measurements need to be empirical, that ideas need to be testable, and finally, it needs to be open and honest to scrutiny. And so we fully disclose our data. So we need an experiment to figure out how these natural laws actually operate. They're not visible to us, but they're predictable, they're consistent. And so our job is to try to describe them in some sort of cause and effect relationship. And it's not a black box or even a blue box. Science doesn't deal with that. That's magic, right? So if I were to take this box and show you that it's empty, and then grab a rock, put it in the box, I shouldn't then be able to pull out a wad of cash. That'd be great if I could do that, but that's magic, or camera tricks, right? Put that right back in there where it's safe. So science doesn't deal with black boxes. It deals with predictable natural laws, like gravity, which we can't see, but we know that if we drop something, we can see the effects of gravity. So even though the natural law itself, the forces may be invisible, the effects are not, and we can measure them. So what we're trying to figure out in an experiment is the relationship between some cause and some effect. And what we're really trying to get at is, what is the natural law or rules that operate
that make these two related to one another. So this cause, to put it in more scientific terms, is the independent variable. So you'll see that a lot, and the other one, since it depends on it, is the dependent variable. So that kind of lays out the formal part of it. So let's go back to that idea of the lawn. So what I saw really was that neighbor's lawn was greener than mine. That was the effect, but I wasn't sure exactly what the cause was, and that's what I'm really kind of curious about. I'm assuming something is making the grass green, that it's not just random. And so it could be fertilizer, it could be the mowing schedule, it could be that my neighbor is just a better person than I am, and any of these things could cause the grass to be greener. Well, we have to rule out this one because it's not a testable idea. How do you measure better? Definitely could look at mowing and fertilizer, and both of these are variable, right? This is a variable, so I could increase the fertilizer or I could decrease it. I could mow either more or less as well. And I would assume that the grass could be either a deep green, or if it's really sickly, yellow, but it could be any value in between that as well. So the greenness also varies. Important that it is a variable. Really key idea that you understand in science is the concept of variables. Well, let's look at the other one that I talked about, the dogwood and when it bloomed. And so the blooming time could be influenced by temperature. It could be the amount of light, in other words, how many hours in the day is it light outside. It could be the birds singing somehow cue the plant. That sounds a little bit silly, but we don't want to rule anything out. And so I could do an experiment with the bloom time where I put in the heater and I would be testing temperature in that case. Or I could turn on a light at night and add more light and see if I could get it to bloom a little bit earlier, basically fooling it into thinking that it's later in the spring than it is. All my measurements here need to be empirical. Let's come back to that idea. I need an empirical way of measuring greenness. I need to measure the fertilizer. I can't just say more or less. How many grams or kilograms am I putting on per acre? Give me an actual time frame of mowing, hours of daylight, degrees Celsius for temperature, all empirical measurements. And so this may require some patience. Not all experiments can be done in an afternoon. So this one might probably take months. This one maybe years, because we don't want to just do it once. If I put a heater on and it blooms at a different time, does that mean that it worked? Hard to say. That seems a little doubtful. So good experiments really put the suspect, which is the hypothesis, on trial to test the hypothesis thoroughly and rule out all other possibilities. So for example, when I was talking about the blooming time of the dogwood tree, I guess I could put a heater on the tree 1 year and see if that makes it bloom sooner or maybe even later. But if there are other possibilities, then I haven't ruled that out. What if it was the birds singing or the direction of the wind?
or the music that the neighbor was playing. So it could be all kinds of things. I need some sort of basis of comparison. So I guess I'd need 2 dogwood trees, which I don't have, and I'd put one in a soundproof booth so that it wouldn't be exposed to music, maybe even shield it from the wind. And then I could start to narrow things down. I could rule out other possibilities, other suspects, so to speak. Let's think about a drug trial. So if you had a drug that you thought worked for weight loss, then maybe it was the drug that caused weight loss in certain people, but maybe they started exercising. You have to be able to show that you've ruled that possibility out. And so that becomes a little bit tricky. We really want to know beyond a reasonable doubt that our hypothesis is the thing that is really causing a certain effect. And you should be able to evaluate then whether an experiment is convincing or not. They make a convincing argument in 2 ways. One, that their methods are solid, that they've designed their experiment well, and we'll concentrate on that. The other part that we won't talk about as much is that you can analyze the data, that you look at it and maybe their analysis and say, do I agree with their analysis? Or do I look at the same data and come to a different conclusion? It's more what statistics is about and other analysis forms. So let's go back to that experiment about the lawns. And I just been using old Miracle-Gro, and I asked my neighbor and he wouldn't tell me, and then finally I got it out of him. And his secret recipe, he swears by it, this is going to seem strange, is tomato ketchup. And not just any tomato ketchup, but organic tomato ketchup. Man, that's kind of weird. And organic, I mean, I'm not going to try that on my whole lawn. So I think I'm going to do a small trial just to see, not a huge experiment. So I'm going to just have a cup here, and I'm going to do a trial in there. And our independent variable is the one that we have some say-so about. And so this one right here, so let me write it up here, is going to be mine. That's the Miracle-Gro, right? And then I'm going to have one for the ketchup as well. Okay, and so I'm going to come around and I'm going to put my seeds in and start watering and see how it goes. Well, I might also want one more, and I'm going to call that one the control. You'll hear that a lot in science. This is going to be the one that gets no treatment at all. And so I'm going to have one with Miracle-Gro, one with ketchup, and one with nothing, just plain old stuff. So I'm going to compare all of these trials, but I also need it to be fair as well. And so this variable, which in this case is fertilizer, a lot of times we say I want to isolate that, which just means that I want these to be the only thing that's different between these 3 trials, right? So my control, I'm not going to do anything to. The Miracle-Gro, well, let's sprinkle a little on there. There we go, maybe a little much. And neighbor's ketchup recipe. All right, let's get a little of that in there. Looks about even. All right, so that's pretty good. But what if I went and put this one over in a sunny window, and this one I put in a cupboard, and this one I just stuck under the kitchen sink? That wouldn't be fair at all. So back up to this fairness idea. I need to be fair about that. So what that means is I need to treat them all the same. If I put 3 in there, 3 seeds, then I need to put 3 seeds in there. Remember, I already had the one, and I need to put 3 seeds in there. If I put this one in a sunny window, I need to put this one in a sunny window, and that one too. If I wanted to test a different species, like these little beans here, well, maybe I'll just add those and see
how that one does as well. Maybe it's the wrong species of grass. I'm going to put 2 in each of these so that in every respect they're the same. It's the same size cup, it's the same amount and type of soil, same seeds, same drainage holes. Everything about them is the same except for one thing: what fertilizer I used. And this one gives me the basis for comparing and seeing, are either of these any good? Maybe both of them are rubbish and I shouldn't use either of them. Pretty sure ketchup is a bad idea. So to look at this just one more way, let's say we have our 2 variables, independent and dependent. I know the greenness of the grass can vary from yellow to deep green, and my hypothesis was that it's the fertilizer that affects the greenness of the grass. But we certainly know that it could be that soil influences it, and the amount of traffic on the grass, probably not a big deal in the cups, maybe even the species of the grass. And so what we want to do is, again, isolate just the fertilizer as a variable, and so we're going to eliminate these as variables. Now that's the tricky part. So we still have an independent variable and a dependent variable. Soil can vary as well, so it is a variable, but we're going to control it instead of letting it vary. And so these are controlled variables. We're not going to let anybody walk on it, so traffic is not any different. It's not a variable. We're going to use all the same species, so that's no longer a variable. The only thing that varies now is the fertilizer. I've isolated that variable. Sometimes you'll see this as standardized variables, these guys that we've kept from changing. And sometimes you can do that to a great degree, and sometimes it's a little difficult. They're going to vary a little bit. Well, let's say it turned out that, against all odds, the ketchup worked, that it actually made grass grow greener. What else might it be good for? Ketchup has natural mellowing agents and a million household uses, so maybe it's good for all kinds of things. Maybe it causes weight loss. Who knows? Let's give it a shot. Let's design an experiment. And this is kind of a fake drug trial in a way, just in a silly way of doing it. And let's say that I try this on a couple of friends. So I have some friends, and one of them that I give ketchup to, yes, and the other one, no. And it just happens to be that the one that got the ketchup was a Norwegian male, and his wife is actually from Argentina. She's female. And what happened? He actually gained 3 pounds and she lost 5 pounds. What do you make of that? Probably nothing. You're right. Because although he had ketchup, and we might give up and say, oh, well, clearly that one didn't work. Maybe it was the extra calories in ketchup. Maybe it was something else. Yeah, but it could be that they're of different origins, and it could be male and female. Clearly, those are some pretty significant differences. And so this shows you in kind of a silly way how important it is to isolate those other variables, because we know that there's lots of different things that affect weight loss as well. How old you are, your gender, obviously big ones being your diet, and if you exercise. All those are going to affect weight loss. Do we know that any of these things were held the same with these 2 people? Well, no, we know they're not. First of all, they're the same gender, so a better trial with this one would be to control these guys. Look, we're only going to accept people in my ketchup weight loss challenge that are ages 20 to 25. So age is not a variable. They're all going to be male. I'm going to give them all the same food, and they can't cheat. In fact, I'm going to pay them to stay inside of a special house that they all get exactly the same food prepared by the same chef, and they're all gonna run on a treadmill for 30 minutes a day. So these are not variables. The only thing that's different between these people, and I probably, I want thousands of them tested over years. The only thing that's different is half the group gets ketchup and the other one does not. And that way I can say with a fair bit of confidence, and I can sort of convict this hypothesis that time after time after time, even though I know that the only thing different between these groups of people is that some ate ketchup and some didn't, these were the results. That the people with ketchup, just like the lawn, of course, they all lost weight and people without ketchup didn't. So go ahead and get yourself a bottle of ketchup. I understand it's still well stocked on the shelves.